Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the wonderful Trondheim, where we will be building a habitat for a Marvel legend. It's Wolverine himself making an appearance. But first, we're kicking things off with a quick look at our second Himalayan brown bear habitat. I did promise to add this to a shorter video, and this is probably the shortest one left at this zoo. Now, as I said, this habitat is much the same as the original, as it uses all of the same items, rocks and foliage, which is why I didn't give it a video of its own. It is ever so slightly smaller, but only by about 100 square meters, and it's also built into a mountain, although it's the backside, so I didn't have to add quite as many rocks, and just focus more on the foliage layout and the small artificial waterfall. There are a lot more artificial barriers in this version, just because of where we started the build, and some of them are climbable, unfortunately. So I've had to be a bit more strategic where I place trees and bushes to cut off access. And that's all there really is to say about it. Of course, we've had more cubs. This female's a bit of an overachiever, so we have 3 little fluff balls running around that will one day be entering the wide world and help save the species. Not bad for a humble zoo builder like myself. Anyway, we will return with our feature build for our little Logans. Today is a good day. Why, you might ask? Well, we've been in talks with a couple of different locations for potential new establishments. At the moment, we have it narrowed down to 3 possibilities. I suppose I can say what they are. That wouldn't hurt. The first is big. A large African savanna area for what would be quite a large conservation safari. Very exciting. But it's a big commitment. I don't quite know if we're ready for that yet. The second is in the Middle Eastern desert. Again, very exciting, challenging. I don't know how I feel about going from one extreme to another, but it's certainly one that I would be interested to do. And the final one is in the USA, which would be a bit of a step backwards. More of an American version of the Highland Reserve, where we'd be effectively getting a foot in the door on the continent. All 3 would be fun and interesting. I just need to weigh up the pros and cons and do what works best for us in the long run. On the plus side, thanks to the success of the Trondheim National Park, we are certainly having a lot more opportunities open to us. So it was worth braving the cold after all. On to today's animals, the Wolverine. Not an easy species to breed in captivity, but there are some places that have had success. We acquired ours from a zoo in Sweden. Another helping hand from the Scandies. We've benefited quite a bit from our neighbours in the north. I'm wondering if they have the same sort of relationships as us in the British Isles. You know, we're all happy families as long as we're given enough respect, but at any international sporting event you can expect to be abused and berated. With love, of course. These animals I have always thought as either honey badgers on steroids or small wolves with Napoleon syndrome. Vicious little buggers with something to prove. So, while it might be entertaining to let one loose among the guests and observe the outcome, you know, for science, I decided to do the responsible thing and go a little bit overboard on the barriers. These are actually almost the same as the ones we used for the bears, although I feel like the bears would be a little bit more chill if they did escape. One thing I did want to include here was some sort of interior sleeping area with a viewing for guests. Many zoos include these where possible because, well, animals aren't always active, especially if they're bored or depressed because they're locked up. Sometimes they just want to sleep. We've all been there. I haven't added much like this in this zoo, as a lot of the older buildings like the barns aren't usually built for it, or the animals have caves, so I've been adding little cameras instead. But we do have the lynx habitat from episode 2, and the penguins. Some of the newer buildings that were purpose-built with big interior areas. But this one is more of a traditional sleeping box viewing window. Just a small insight into their bedding area, as they don't need a big indoor play park. I tried to make it into a bit of a cave so that it fit with the design of the rest of the zoo, but that was a little bit excessive. Don't get me wrong, with the red night light it looks really cool in there, but the exterior could have been a bit more subtle, less tacked on, you know? I think with the foliage it looks fine from the middle of the habitat, but it does stick out a bit on the approach. Something I should probably note as we're moving through the next couple of episodes. As I was needing the scenic shots for this, my frame rate turned into one of those carousel slide projectors that were around before they added the PS to FPS. So I have had to limit the number of guests to around 2,500 to get some smooth recordings. It was that or remove the rocks, and frankly they're worth more to me than money, so... Seems like a lot considering the size of the zoo. But bear in mind, we have all of the enclosures squeezed into less than a quarter of the map. All of those individual pieces were bound to take their toll eventually. The lower guest count does mean that we're losing a little bit of money though, so it's only temporary while we're recording. But it's good to know that it helps, so we can play around with that and the difficulty to perhaps save some larger zoos in the future. Before I forget again, if you found yourself enjoying this video at any point, please leave a like. And if you want to see all of the upcoming content that I have planned and in the works, go ahead and subscribe. I'm always adjusting and developing the style and quality of my videos to make better and more entertaining content, so there will always be something shiny and new on the horizon to look forward to. I've set a goal of 100 subscribers for 2026. My main targets are quality and enjoyment improvements, but I have a goal-focused mind, so some sort of sub-goal helps the progression and incentive a little bit. Anyway, enough of that. There's a video going on here. Now, I don't know much about Wolverines besides their adamantium skeletons and retractable claws, so I thought I'd do a little bit of research to get an idea of what they are like beyond the comic propaganda. And the first thing I see is that they are known for having a ferocity and strength out of proportion to their size. Which makes sense. The smaller they are, the more prone to violence. Although whether that's down to the insecurity about their height, you can only speculate. Now, while they are roughly the size of a mid-sized dog, they have been known to kill deer, cattle, and moose. Moose! That's like a big horse with antlers being taken down by a beagle. It's a good job they aren't bigger, or they'd be the dominant species on this planet. I would apologise for making fun of them, but nobody here gets special treatment. This habitat isn't quite central. I consider the main thoroughfare along the mountain from where the snow leopards are to the wolves to be the main area. Mostly because of the high density of structures and building pieces, which of course makes it a little bit framey at times. This is slightly off to one side of that area, on the same mountain, which means the habitat didn't end with the decoration inside the enclosure. The same could be said for the seals last week. I spent more time on the scenery around the lake and the mountainside than the enclosure itself. And it's a similar thing here. In order for this to really tie into the rest of the surroundings, I needed to flesh out the whole area, including some of the approach to the next week's build. Although, I think that is mostly hidden in the video. You can let me know your guesses for what that's going to be though. I'll give you a clue. It likes the cold. I added on quite a lot of extra mountainside and woodland for the sake of the background to this habitat that will probably never get seen, which is a bit of a shame. Or I suppose you'd call it a massive waste of effort. But I wanted this zoo to look good from wherever you stood as a guest. Having walked through a few times, I'd say it's about 90 to 95% successful. Obviously we're a bit close to the border at places. I'm not sure exactly how much time I've added to my playtime in Trondheim, but it must be a couple of 100 hours. Time well spent. This is another one of those display habitats where everything's on an incline towards the back, so the animals can use the whole space and still be visible from the guest viewing points. I have noticed the wolverines climbing to the top of the trees on occasion though, so it can appear empty at times. I thought about changing the trees out, but I don't know. If they like climbing and can't escape from there by extending the skin beneath their legs like some sort of flying fox and gliding to freedom, I don't see the harm in it. Let the guests search a little bit. It's not meant to be easy. The foliage for these little guys was really fun actually. They have a lot of tolerance for it, so I could once again go bananas. It's a bit tricky because of the location. The side of the mountain doesn't have the deepest soil for planting, so there are areas where it's a bit thin on the ground, or the trees are short, stunted because their roots have been blocked. But I think there's a good balance to make it look interesting and full. This is the kind of enclosure I would have most of the time for animals if I was building them in sandbox, with the requirements turned off. I don't think I'll get a chance to do a signature zoo on this game actually. It's a shame. I know lots of the big creators have their showstoppers, the big zoos that they work on long term. Perfect. But we are coming ever closer to the release of Planet Zoo 2, so if anything it will be on there. I'm working on some other things as well. May not be of interest to you zoo fans, but I don't want to box myself in too much, I'll be perfectly honest, I don't have a lot to say on the actual build for this habitat. It has a feel of being carved out of the mountainside, which I really like. The rockwork lines the border and bleeds into the middle at points, which I think looks really natural, so I'm happy with that. Kind of surprised the wolverines can't climb it, but I guess the game needs some boundaries to make it more functional. The trees and grasses are all very consistent with other habitats, and I've placed them in a way that highlights the well-travelled paths and doesn't obstruct the view too much. Of course, the enrichment I left until last again, so most of the larger things are near the bottom where it's a bit flat already. And I added a climbing frame, because they like climbing frames, but I don't. I think all the climbing stuff is kind of messed up. For instance, I have that platform sitting there on top of a couple of beams, with the beams centered underneath it, but the wolverines will still climb up the beam through the middle of the platform to get on top of it. Things like that just look bad to me, It's not the end of the world, but I'm hoping there's better pathing for animals in the new game. I guess they'll probably be bringing in some tools from Jurassic World as well, like the resizing tool. That'd be quite good. It'd be interesting to see if they add the scenery brushes too. I think that would close the gap somewhat between the casuals and the pros. For foliage anyway. I haven't played that yet, but it is on my PC. Just waiting for me to do anything other than Planet Zoo at the moment. Maybe I'll make a video on that at some point. Probably after I figure out all the tips and tricks. I do love dinosaurs. In fact, if you know any good zoo or park or, animal management style games like Planet Zoo or Zoo Tycoon, Jurassic World, anything like that, let me know and I'll give it a go. Need to branch out a bit from the 5 or 6 games that I love and go back to. Seeing as we are nearing the end of Trondheim, it's getting to that time where I start evaluating what I'm going to carry into the next zoo and how I'm going to switch things up. I have some ideas brewing, ways of recording, planning and putting the videos together, so it'll be fun to do something a bit different. The format didn't change much from the Highland Reserve to Trondheim. Mainly just quality, and then I've tried to add some things in, little extras here and there. So it's mainly learning the software at the moment, but this time I'm going to change up the process a little bit and see if we can improve things. I'm going to miss this soon. I know it sounds like I'm ready to leave already, the amount I've talked about what's going on next and the end. But I've really enjoyed the process of this zoo. I feel like this is the best building and design that I've ever done in the game, by far. So it'll be a sad day when I close the game, knowing that I'll probably never open this zoo again. I know any of my zoo friends knows that's how it goes. Once you move on to the next project, you never go back. But at least it's here, for the world to enjoy. Much better than nothing. It will live on. And maybe one day I'll get to go to the real Trondheim and check out any local zoos for myself, see how far off I am. There's Wolverines in this video? You wouldn't have thought it with the amount of yapping I've done. I've talked about the end of Trondheim, the video production, dinosaurs. It's like I'm trying to fill a word count or something. We do have Wolverines, and at the time of recording, we also have successfully bred them. That's right. Baby Weapon X survived a precarious upbringing in captivity and has already been gifted to a zoo we have worked with in the past. To help them out. That's how we do it in the Zooverse. Looking out for one another, saving the zoo future until our new world is created. That sounds like a good place to stop talking, I think. We are so very close to the end. Of this video, not the series this time. I don't know if that's actually accurate. I haven't placed the voiceover onto the video yet, but I'm guessing that it's close to, stick around for those scenic shots of the Wolverines at the end. I hope very much that you have enjoyed today's video and my rambling. Make sure to leave a like to support the channel, and subscribe to make sure upcoming videos hit your feed. I am ever appreciative of anyone who watches my videos, so thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in the next one.